Jack, Frank, thank you for taking the time to. Sorry, I'm just trying to put my camera on. Taking the time to sort of speak with us on this. I thought if we could start, guys, with just sort of two sort of simple questions. So for before we kind of delve into the detail of what you're doing here, could you kind of tell us sort of how this came about as a project briefly? And then again, at a sort of high level, let's imagine that we haven't all read the blue line. What's basically changing?
Okay, I'll take a quick shot at this. Basically, this started last December when we something that I did with Mark Thorne, talked about with him, the late Mark Thorne, is that we assigned all of the boards, commissions, grants, departments, and anything that interacted with the government to various committees, identifying who was primary and who was secondary. From there, we went and I read the definitions of the various committees, which, to be honest with you, I probably hadn't done in a number of years, and I was gobsmacked. I read them to Kate Bush, and her mouth hit the floor even more because they're not accurate. In addition, the text, which was originally done in the 70s, modification in the mid 80s, and then again in the 90s, didn't really account for FOIA, didn't really record the fact that we're doing Robert's Rules of Order. And even though it was done in the mid 90s, the last minor changes to this appendix and this part, it had something like Public Works was responsible for looking at the incinerator, which was demolished in 1993. So there were a lot of things that had to change. So we went to rules, assigned TGS&A, and asked F&B to assist, although not one of the reporting things. So that's how this project evolved. We originally sent things out to department chairs to ask for some preliminary input. After discussion with Frank and rules, we decided that we were going to look at the whole thing, not just the definitions of the appendix. So that answers the first part. The second part, there's a couple of things that are changing. We took out a couple of things that we thought no longer applied to us. Simple things like it constantly said that there, a meeting with a quorum. Well, since we're following Robert's Rules of Order, it's not a meeting unless it's a quorum. So we were able to take out simple things like that. Also, some of the things of how things were operating just weren't reality to how things really are operating, including how we go and find a moderator. Some of the committees, that Seth will always ask if there are other committees that want to report. Well, essentially, based upon the current ordinance, the only committees that can report on any resolution or any part happens to be those that were assigned by rules. Plus, there were a lot of other minor changes that we'll go through on the detail, but that's covers some of the big things that were there. Some of the basics we're keeping. We added a little bit more definition. We changed the definitions by taking some things and moving it up. We modified some of the things that were going on in rules, such as it says that the moderator assigned committees to resolutions. That's not how we operate currently. Rules does. The concept that we did was to try and empower the standing committees as independent units that allow them to operate in their area. Now, you guys have education, and that's sort of like its own standalone country, different than the other standing committees that face off against the town. But in that particular case, we also want to empower and encourage people when they look against some of the areas that are in, I'm going to say like Park and Rec. If somebody's interested in 5 Mile River, well, they're supposed to be watching what goes on in that commission so people can sort of split off. That's what happens already in Public Works as they divide it up. Somebody's looking at sewer, somebody's looking at the transfer station, somebody's looking at flooding, and they have another things that get reported on in each area. So that's just some of the basics. The process that we did was we took the information we got from the committee chairs. Frank and I sat down and went through each of the areas. Um, we've been in touch with Seth and Wayne throughout the process. We brought it to rules. The next decision was to bring it to all of the standing committees, not only to discuss their definition, but the whole document, get feedback. The feedback has been very good. As anybody knows from business, you keep on reading the same document, you're going to miss things. And I was told by Frank to thank Janet because your grammar assistance is very well appreciated for both Frank and I. So thank you for that. We do appreciate that. So we went to the committees as changes or clarifications were added. We just added it to the document for like 90%, 95% of what was suggested. Because the concept is to build a consensus document here. This is how the RTM will be operating, hopefully for the next 10, 15, or 20 years. So that's basically where we are. So I'm going to run through this. I'm not going to cover things that have changed. You have the blue line. I'm not really going to go into what we eliminated because our focus really is on this new document. The goal is to have by next Monday this document finalized, reviewed by Wayne, brought to the Rules Committee. The only committee that I believe will be voting on it is TGS&A. They will be presenting it to us at our first meeting after the election. And there'll be two parts of business that'll be happening at that November meeting. There's a Public Works union contract that we have to report on, and that's one of the changes that we'll talk about. And also then this document. The desire is because we've brought it to everyone, we've reached out to a lot of people afterwards, is that hopefully it's an up or down. This is the document, everybody's seen it, they've made comment on it, and we can move it through quickly on that night. But we are open for changes and other things up until that time to get things going. So I'm going to really, one of the big things that we did is we did some things here. It had words like commission in here for the RTM. The RTM doesn't establish commissions, it establishes special committees or ad hoc committees to go work. And so we correct that. We kept that one person from each district will be assigned to each of the standing committees. Although when that assignment and organization meeting happens, if a district is short a couple people, the name of that person might be open. That's what's been happening since I've been around anyway, and that will continue. Same thing about the moderator. On the annual meeting, this is one of the things that we changed on page 2, small e, and that's in the past it said that the moderator would set up a committee and garner names for who was interested in being the moderator. But since the moderator was typically running for moderator again, they had to recluse themselves, and they didn't set up a hierarchy of how things would move from there. Over the number of years, maybe 10, 15, even longer, what's really been happening is the vice chair of rules solicits names for who's interested in the moderator. Actually, what happens is names get nominated, and some people say that's nice that my name was put in there, but I'm not interested. And then there's also nominations from the floor of the RTM. So Section E was rewritten to accommodate that area. Section A reports on the publishing. Now, you guys do have a little bit on this. What we're trying to do is have subcommittees. So like in education, yes, you have the Board of Ed, but there's the communication subcommittees, the curriculum, the finance, and there may be other subcommittees that they bring up. So that's just supposed to be reported into rules. The document, which in the past was called the matrix, is now being referred to as the RTM scope document, which lists who's primary and who's secondary on all aspects of this. And it's going to be
Jen, so you jump in. We're following, right? So I just have a comment on that matrix, if I can, on the scope.
okay. Be my guest quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
that's the section G, right? In section 1, that's the paragraph G. And I just could you share with us, or could you tell us where we can find the latest version of it? I know you've sent it some time ago. I just want to make sure we have the latest.
It's being updated because we have things like when it was first done, you had Great Island, and like Great Island, and the advisory committee wasn't there. That's one that's not going to be assigned to any one committee. It's like everybody should follow, including probably education, because you don't know what educational events may be done on Great Island. So every committee has to follow what's going on there. And people will pick and choose. The rules will pick and choose based upon what the initiative is. If it's new bonding, F&B will lead it, but not necessarily define it. But if it's something like they're building a road, then maybe it's public works. If they're doing some leases, then it's PZ&H.
And certainly this is a live document, right? But the question, if it's,
yes, you're going to be given a new one. The goal is every year that a new one will be issued to all RTM members with this appendix and the matrix right after election to all RTM members.
Perfect. Good. Thank you.
So this just says that the rules is maintaining it in the future. Standing committees are responsible for reviewing and getting rid of some things that no longer, perfect example that actually applies to you guys is that the Oxbridge Building Committee, from one of the last reports that I heard, is that maybe in 6 months that building committee will no longer exist. So that has to be taken off. That'll be taken off the list and go from there. But HHR is still going on. So, and you guys are primary on that. So, so that's just one of the things that will be a moving, living document. One thing that was not put into this section, but was throughout the other parts of this, is that we do comply with FOIA. And I think when this was really written, FOIA wasn't necessarily in existence. And we do follow Robert's Rules of Order revised. We're not putting in the version. One part in our ordinances has version 10, but they're up to 14. So we've just been told use the word revised, and it just means the latest and greatest. So that brings us to Part 4, Section 2. And these are the 7 standing committees. One of the things, just as a little bit of history, and Janet, you may recall this of when it happened, because I don't, but there used to be a big pin board that everybody put the names on. We now do it electronically. And there was a column in there that wasn't being used anymore because somehow 2 committees were combined into one. And I don't know how long ago that was done, but I think it was done maybe 20 years ago or earlier. So
they combined public health and safety.
Even longer than that. I don't remember that 2 were made into one.
Okay, we think it was public health and safety and being done that. But one of the things that was raised by one of the committees is, should the town change its organization and structure, or they come up with another thing like they want a technology area, that the Rules Committee, with the approval of the RTM, may add, delete, or combine any of the standing committees of the RTM. So yes, the rules will generate that, but it still has to go to the full RTM for approval. But we wanted it to be in the document so that people aren't fumbling around saying, can we do this? the next part, which is section 3.
Hey, Jack, I have a question here on 2 again.
Can
Okay.
I just
Last
ask,
sentence.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry,
I'll go
do you
Clara
want
first.
to go do the questions section by section, or do you want to wait till you're done and do the questions?
Do it as soon as I'm talking. So when I'm talking, if you have a question, speak up, because
Okay.
if we'll make modifications right away. So
Well, you don't have, no,
yeah.
okay. I have two things. One, just overall, Appendix B, is that part of the town charter, or is that something alongside the town charter?
Alongside the town charter, it's part of our
Okay.
ordinances.
Okay, good. And then in the responsibilities for the Education Committee, liaison with the Board of Ed and be responsible for the following. That's section
We're
I.
going to get to that. Can you wait till we get
I can
there?
wait. Okay, all right, I'll wait.
All right.
So my question was,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Peter.
Clara, finish up, and then,
No, Peter, it's Peter's turn. It's okay.
okay.
yeah, so I have a question still on section 2, the last sentence that we added there, which you guys, Rules Committee is having the discretion to cancel, delete, or combine a committee. I just want to make sure, it's a little bit cumbersome here. I want to make sure I understand it. You can suggest it at your discretion, right? But the ultimate decision of combining or deleting comes to the vote of RTM. Am I reading it correctly?
You're reading it exactly right. Yes.
Okay. Got it. Perfect. Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're going to go to section. Go ahead, Janet. Sorry.
What has occasioned an interest in making new committees? What's an example of something that somebody might like?
It's not that anybody has anything on the table, nor am I recommending it, or Frank recommending it, or the document recommending. What we're enabling the Rules Committee to do, and this came out of another committee, is that should the town reorganize, and since we face off against the town in how we structure our committees, that we would be able to modify that. Will we ever use this again? Hopefully not. But it's just saying you're empowered to do this if you need to. Now, one of the committees that did come up as an example that might be is a technology committee, because more and more the town, the Board of Ed are depending upon technology. So whether or not there's just a committee that just looks at the technology at the town. So I'm not suggesting that.
There
I'm
was
just saying, you asked for a potential example. I'm giving the best potential example
It's
we
sort
could
of
come
like
up with.
having a telephone committee, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, I'm not saying that it's going to happen. So I don't want to spend time. It's just saying, should something happen, they're empowered to react to it. That's all it's saying. Clara.
I was just going to say, a few years ago, there was interest in an environmental committee. That's just another example. And with Great Island, I don't know if that will come up, but anyway, it happens. So that's all.
Yeah, you know what? Depending upon how the governance of Great Island is, there may end up being a Great Island committee. I can't say there is or isn't, but this is just giving them the authorization and
Right.
saying you can do this, not that we're telling you to do it. All right? Because that means we have to rewrite all these definitions again. And this was a long enough job doing it to have to rewrite everybody else's again. It's not something that either Frank and I are looking forward to, or anybody else who's there in the future. So one of the things that we try to do is take some of the things that all the committees do and put them into section 3. So up-to-date informations on meetings regarding the scope, maintain contact with relative boards, commissions, committees, departments, etc. Recommend action on the meeting of proposed and pending resolutions, legislative matters. Just another statement, because we want to make sure that it's inclusive and there's no question. We're telling everyone you got to follow state laws, you got to follow the ordinances, you got to follow the charter. That's what the RTM will be doing. Doesn't mean you're not going to occasionally make modifications to the ordinances. We do that all the time. So talks about the roles of the budget, because, and again, I'm speaking to education, and you guys are a little bit different because there's certain things I know you already do, but it's not just looking at an annual budget. It's also looking at what the 5-year capital plans are. It's looking at the capital plan itself. These are things that the boards present, but we're saying you should be reviewing this. And it's not so much for education, because I know you guys do. It's also for the other committees. So if you're in Public Works, you should be looking at the 5-year plan. If you're in Park and Rec, you should be looking at a 5-year plan. So it goes and covers some of the other aspects of what the financial aspects of the town are. And, refers to gifts and other things like that. Again, different for the Board of Ed. So that's in D.
Hey, Jack, this D is very, can I just jump in? This is an important point for me, and I've been talking about it for a bunch of years. So I want to, it's a tangential point, but this is an important one. And I know we have Mr. Kemp here, who I'm, happy to engage in this, because I understand he's the brain behind the operation on how we approve budgets. So, we say we're one of the budget making authorities, RTM, right? But in practicality, right, the way it
No,
works,
that's not in practicality. It's a statement.
right?
Every town, the state allows towns to determine how their local government is run. Every town that has a Board of Finance and
Yeah.
an RTM considers
Yeah.
both the Board of Finance and the RTM to be the budget making authorities of that town. So there's
And
different
Jack,
things.
is it in the city? Yeah, is it in every town that when the Board of Finance suggests a budget to the RTM of 4% increase or 5% increase, right? RTM has our RTM has only two options: either say yes or no to it, and if we say no, it reverts to the previous year budget. Am
That's
I
not
correct on
true.
that?
No, you're not.
Not true. Okay.
It's only on the education budget,
Yeah.
and we have three options there. All
Yeah.
right. And I'll deal with education operations first, because
Yeah.
education capital is different. On an education operations budget, we can either approve, we
Yeah.
can make a suggestion to reduce, but it's a difficult thing to reduce because, and Clara can verify this, we're approving a total appropriation. So if you don't like that they ordered 10,000 pencils, you can cut the 10,000 pencils dollar amount. I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
But the Board of Ed, since everything we see is a placeholder, can still buy those $10,000 of pencils and take the money away from something else. So that's the second option. You can make a reduction to their budget. And the third thing is you can reject the budget. If you
Yeah.
reject the Board of Ed budget, all right, then they revert to the prior year's budget until they bring back another budget that then gets approved. So it's not like it's dead in the water. It just, they get to come back and say, okay, here's the new budget. And then it goes through the same process.
And that's the Board of Finance approved budget that we are opining on, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so Board of Finance.
So now let's go to the town side.
Yeah.
Town side has the same thing, except on the town side, we have line item veto. We have line item veto on all capital. But again, if I'm going to just say something, let's say we're doing a drainage project and they say they want $2 million.
Yeah.
And somebody says, we don't need $2 million. We only need $1.5 million. On capital, it's an up or down. We can't
Yeah.
modify that amount to be 1.5 million. All right. The next thing on the town side, and this happened the first year that I was took over for Jim Palin as chair. The governor, and I'm not making a political comment, so I apologize, but the governor reduced state aid to 20 towns. All right. The Board of Finance voted without having those funds in their budget. Subsequent to when the Board of Finance voted, the governor returned a good portion of those funds to those 20 towns. Now, the Board of Finance doesn't have the authority to go back and modify that income, but the RTM actually reduced our mill rate by an amount to account for the incremental revenue that we were going to get by state aid. So we can adjust revenue by adjusting the mill rate. That's one
Yeah.
option for us.
Yeah.
We have line item veto, which allows us to say, no, we think that the police, I'm just going to pick on something. No, you want to hire this one person. We think it's too much. We're not going to approve the hire. And we take out $60,000, $70,000, whatever. Or we cut another part of the budget. Or if we reject the whole budget, all right, then they revert back to the prior year's budget, which is on both cases very difficult because there's contracts that are signed.
Sure, union contracts, right? Yeah, that's
Right.
right.
That
So,
are
Jack,
driving.
let me. Yeah, can I just quickly? This is very important. I've been struggling with this, so thank you for the clarification. So, in this hypothetical scenario where Board of Finance comes and suggests to the RTM a 3% increase in Board of Education operational budget, right? And
Yep.
we say, listen, times are tough. We would like it to be 2%. We can vote at that budget approval meeting to suggest to Board of Finance and therefore to Board of Education to go back and
No, we do it on the
No?
floor.
yeah,
We should, first of all, if we or any group is feeling that the Board of Ed budget is too high, you probably should be discussing that with the Board of Finance long before they
Right.
go to vote.
Of
So
course.
let's just say that first. Number two, if they voted on a budget, all right, that has the total amount, then, and you want to reduce it, I'm just going to say their budget's $1 million because I like round
Right.
numbers.
Right.
And it went up to be, we're going to say 5% increase. It went up to $1.5 million, and you believe it should only go up by 3%. Then the RTM would propose cutting $2 million out of the Board of Ed total appropriation on the floor of the RTM.
And vote
Okay.
on that. Got it.
Right,
So,
and it either passes or it doesn't.
but it's only reduction, right? So if Board of Finance said, listen, Board of Education wants 5%, but we think it's appropriate to have it flat this year, we cannot come back and say, guys, let's split the difference, right? We, because of the union
Well, we
contract,
can.
should
No,
drop
you
by
absolutely can say split the difference by going and cutting it on the floor of the RTM.
But this is not cutting. This is increasing, right? If Board of Finance comes
We
with a zero,
cannot
can't
increase the Board of,
No,
on the Board of Ed, because we're doing an appropriation, a total
Yeah.
appropriation, we cannot increase the budget. All right? Now, I will tell you, and I always get this wrong, Clara, so correct me if I use the wrong initials. When the SRBI was being discussed at the Board of Ed, F&B, and I was vice chair of education, I felt so strongly that it was such a good program to implement for a whole series of benefits that I went, and I know they were discussing it at the Board of Finance at the time. Mary Stegelman was chair at the time. And I believe, Clara, you were on the board at that time. We went in front of them and say, do not cut this. This is a very important program. So in that way, we can influence increases. But once something is done, we can't control what we're giving them the money for because it's a total appropriation. Is that the right way to say it, Clara?
I think you're right. And SRBI is the right initial. It's
Yeah,
the right
thank you.
acronym. Okay. All right. That's good. Okay.
So
But-
this is very helpful. Thank you. And I appreciate our role is to talk during the budget process to the appropriate, folks. But at the end of the day, it's Board of Finance who serves us a document that we may not agree with, right? But we have flexibility as RTM to suggest a lower number, but not higher.
Well,
Correct.
we can on revenue on the town side.
Yeah. I'm just talking about
But
the
on education,
operation.
no.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Right. So,
Perfect.
and let me just add one other thing, because at one time I was quoted when they were doing charter and they asked whether or not we should increase it.
Right,
And
right.
I was quoted in the Darien Times as saying, if the Board of Ed wants to buy $50 million worth of crayons, they can, because it's a total appropriation and everything's really just a placeholder. Now, they'd all go to jail, mind you, but the
Yep.
fact of the matter is, and that's what I also said, and then not that they were ever going to do that, but you can't control what they'd be spending the money on. That's why things can move during the course of the year, as long as it's within the 7 categories.
Sure, sure. That makes sense. I wish we had the flexibility to, in that scenario where we believe the Board of Education has a point of increasing budget by number and Board of Finance is against that. I wish we had an opportunity to meet them in the middle maybe. But I now understand how we
It's a
operate, how
lot
it
of
goes down.
negotiation, and part of that is, and Ed and I and others met last year with the members of the Board of Ed. Some of the members of the Board of Ed, Jim Palin was there, and we discussed the increase that was going on in the budget, and we talked about different things in there. So, and I do believe that if you look at last year's Board of Ed budget, it was a very collaborative effort with
Oh,
input
100%.
from the 2 RTM committees, the Board of Finance, and members of the Board of Ed. And it was a really good budget when you look at it.
Can I ask a question about the document that you revised, or are you not finished?
No, go ahead.
Yeah,
I wanted to go into that, but I'll take a question now.
Okay,
Go
I
ahead.
just want to ask before you leave. So in the duties, I like, section I, liaison with the Board of Ed and be responsible for monitoring, reporting, and recommending on all education matters. I think that's very broad, and it's a good revision from the way it was before. But what I would be interested in knowing is, does that mean that the Education Committee can consider issues that are not assigned to it by the Rules Committee? I mean, if something's going on in the town, for example, a few years ago, there was a program called Open Choice that was proposed by the Board of Ed. Some folks on the Education Committee felt that as a group, we should have commented on it. Individual people commented, but they felt that as a group, we should have commented. Other examples, stuff that might come up in the community, like the age has changed to start kindergarten. If we were here, can we talk about those things even when we're not assigned it by the Rules Committee?
Okay. So
Yes,
the answer is the 2 things. I do want to first say, I wanted to just explain, because we added the words following, monitoring, reporting, and then somebody else said we are recommending, because in fact, I want to explain what each one of those are.
Right.
Following is you're just following as you do committees and all the work that they do in the various subcommittees, committees, what goes on in board meetings. Monitoring is you're doing your analysis of it. That's the monitoring. It's the analysis part. Reporting is what you might do either inside a committee or to the full RTM, but it's the recommendations part that is very important, because that's giving your opinion. So just reporting facts is one thing, but whenever the committee reports, you're giving an opinion of the committee. It's passed unanimously, or, in some of the stable leases, they didn't pass. That's the recommending of what you want the full RTM to do. And on a lot of the education areas, you're the lead. F&B just handles finances on that. We don't get into curriculum, what you just started about starting age for kindergarten and that. Well, be that not in our purview. We just care about the numbers. So you're really the lead on that. So in the existing ordinance, the one that we're operating under today, not the revised one, you're not allowed to do any work that's not authorized by rules. Yeah, that was my opinion. That was also Kate's opinion. Under the new one, you're authorized to do any analysis that the committee feels is appropriate to move forward. And if you feel that it's important enough, you bring it over to the Rules Committee, and it can be added to an agenda to have a discussion. I'm going to give you a great example. Ed, Mac,
Yes.
and myself organized the stuff on the SSOs where we had that meeting with people. Even though we knew that the financials, it was done, people still felt that they wanted to have a discussion on it. And I thought that meeting that we had at 35 Leroy with Adley and Chief Anderson, and that was a very good meeting. There was an open conversation and discussion that goes on. So that's something that we can do. Whether or not that was authorized by rules or not doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And then it was at least some people felt that it should be addressed on the floor of the RTM, and it got there as well. So yes, there's certain things you're being empowered to do certain analysis if that's the desire of the committee. All right?
But does it still have to go back to rules?
No, not under the new. If you want to have it on the floor of the RTM to have a discussion, since rules sets the agenda, it has to go to rules so it gets onto the agenda,
And
unless
will
you're going to
rules-
bring it up as new business.
Okay, so will rules say yes when we bring it forward?
I can't answer that. I'm only on rules until the end of this year, and then I'll see
I
if
don't
I'm
mean
on
you
next year.
personally, just in general. We could have this good idea, but it goes to you. And
Then if it doesn't go to rules, all right, then the next thing is at the meeting, the full RTM meeting, under new business with a 60% vote, you can bring it to the floor of the RTM.
so in other words, something that we are enthusiastic about and talk about and decide it's worth the whole RTM working on it has to go back to rules before it can come onto the floor. So there's no point in starting to talk about it even.
Well, that's not true. I'll give you an example, and it was just recently challenged. Public Works decided to do an update on the sidewalks. If you remember I never get that acronym right, but there was that sidewalk committee a long time ago that Terry Duffy was on and Bert was on, and they laid out everything for the sidewalks. I forget what it was. There's other people that were on there. Then there was another sidewalk thing. And so Public Works just was in the process of doing an update to report back to their own Public Works committee, just based upon that original plan and the revision, where are we? How are we doing on the sidewalks? All right. That wasn't authorized by rules, which it needs to under the current law. Under the new revision, they will be able to do it, and then they can bring it forward if they so desire to the Board of Selectmen or to, Public Works or to the Board of Finance. F&B has done that frequently, where we've worked with the department heads.
Okay.
We changed how we do the bonding for fire engines. We've cleaned up reserve accounts. We've gone into that. None of those were authorized by rules. But when we went and we worked with department heads and then brought it to either the Board of Selectmen or to the Board of Finance, they were receptive. And you recall, we've cleaned those up. So I still have the belief that good government will be good government.
An example would be right now that there's talk about having different hours for the schools starting. I can't think of a subject that isn't more appropriate for us to be talking about and following and helping out on making that decision. So after we do the work and then we request that it go on the agenda by a rules committee, it's possible that rules will say, no, you don't need to talk about
Sorry,
that.
but I'm not sure, what is it sorry, maybe I'm missing it, but like, I guess I'm not sure what we're talking
Starting
about.
school later in the day.
No, I get it, but like, if that moves ahead and there's like a budget request, then it's gonna be something we're gonna talk about, but independent of that, like, I'm not sure that, guess I'm not really following how that would.
Well, some people might think that we should not change the hours of the schools and it's going to cost a huge amount of money to do that. It's a very complicated subject.
So if I
Sorry.
may add, sorry to jump in, but I think we do have flexibility, Janet. We do have flexibility on page 13. I have comments back on this page, but just to follow up what Janet is asking, I think that we have flexibility on page 13 of this black line that gives us to study. And I'm just going to read it now. Any committee may, on its own motion, consider and report to the RTM upon any matter not referred to it, but which is within the scope of such committee. So we can discuss it. So we do have the flexibility, and we can inform the RTM even if there's no resolution on it. I guess we do have flexibility.
Yes, you
Am I
can.
right? Jack?
And
guess
that's what
I'm-
we're trying to do.
I
And,
guess
Right.
sorry,
and
I guess
I
I
can't,
just don't see the point of that, right? You're basically saying we can get together as a committee, discuss something, and then as a committee, if we all happen to agree on the same words, we then report them to the RTM, but like we're not taking any action. I guess I don't know, it
I-
just feels very pointless.
I
well,
didn't think,
Ed, I would put it a different way, Janet, if you don't mind.
no, I didn't get the end of what Ed said.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes,
And I
didn't-
guess I'm not sure what we'd be doing. We're not
We're
saying
having an
we're
opinion on the
not
subject.
against anything. We're not.
Yes,
Like,
we
I don't
are.
know.
We might not want to change the hours because of the cost involved of
But
all
that's
this
not.
rearranging.
But that's in the budget, not right? I mean that if we don't approve it and it's in the budget, it's not going to happen. I guess I'm talking about independently of it being something that's come before us as business to just want to talk about.
So let me just put in two things. If the committee's looking at this, all right, to a certain extent, one of the things you can do is inform the RTM what's going on the Board of Education, and that's one thing that can be brought before the RTM. But knowing this committee, more importantly than coming back to the RTM, is taking your analysis and your opinion and going to the Board of Ed. That's
Right.
really who you should be talking to. Say, look, the committee looked at this. We're not in, and that's where I'm saying. So to do that work, all right, like when we did an analysis on whether or not we should do the accruals or bonding, F&B, we didn't go back to the RTM and say we think we should do bonding and report to them. What we did is we went to Kate and Jen, who had the bond council look at it to make sure the analysis was right. We brought it to the first selectman, who was Jamie at the time. Jamie and us then brought it to John Zagroski and the Board of Finance at the time, and the decision was made that all future things would be bonded. That's really, but if we didn't do that preliminary analysis, there was a chance that there'd be $20 million of assigned money sitting in the capital accounts waiting to pay for fire engines that none of us would see because they wanted people to pay and accrue for the fire engines that may not be purchased for another 20, 25 years and that. So that's where I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
That you have to
Jack,
work with your boards.
Right. And this is very important, but I have a comment on adding a language to this subsection I. And that's the end of it. We end this thing with educational matters. And I'm going to come back to what you mentioned because I think it relates to another point I want to add in that section. But when we talked about education, it ends up with educational matters. And if I look at all the other committees, they have language they're saying, as well as other areas assigned. So if you guys could add that as well, yeah, I'm sure we can come up with a scenario where it doesn't appear that it's education related, but we think it is.
Done.
And so coming back, and this is very important what you mentioned, right? Which is your work with Kate and Jen as an example about these trucks, right? But when I read what you and Finance and Budget are allowed to do, you are allowed to be a liaison with the Board of Finance, right? And you were talking to town officials. So I wanna make sure that we as members of the RTM Education have the flexibility at some acceptable manner to discuss our questions with the administration, not only with the Board of Education. I don't want Board of Education to become a gatekeeper. Like you, when you didn't talk to Board of Finance only, you talked to the administrator, create an opinion, and then you brought it to them, right? Obviously, the time is variable and all this stuff.
Yeah, different animal because I'm the same way. In the Board of Ed, because they are a different animal, it's always been that you go through the chair of that board to go and speak to the administration. All right, that's just a practice. This isn't going to change that practice. The board operates the way that board operates. All right. Some other boards out here, you go through the chairman only, also. But
So I'm not saying
So
this is a scenario that's currently happening, right? But I remember last time we talked about making the budget process efficient. There is a thought on Board of Education to make sure that they sort of look at our question and vote yes or no, or not vote, but say this is not applicable. We don't want to deal with this. We don't want to bother the administration.
I,
Maybe they're right. Maybe they're not. I guess we have to trust them.
I,
But
I, I think that's part of what they've been, if you go
yeah,
back to a September meeting that the Finance Committee had and some of the
right.
discussions of how they're going to do it, um, and I happen to agree with them. They had too many questions there. Some of the
Yeah, it's
questions
too
were
cumbersome.
not budget related. Some of them, and everyone here, I'm excluding from it because you're all experienced and have done this. Some of the questions I said jokingly to Rich Rudel, because I knew he had a lot. I said, do you want to give me these four? Because I can answer this one,
Right.
and it takes it off your plate. And Clara, you know the same thing when you hear some of these questions, you know the answer to them. And so
Yeah.
we want to try and get those off of the plate. We want to get the non-budget related ones off of their plate. And the other thing that they were mentioning, which I always thought to be a little bit unusual, is that we really shouldn't be asking all of our questions before the Board of Ed's had an opportunity to ask some of theirs.
Right. And the
And
budget
so
time is
that's the other
specific,
thing that
right?
we're
So
trying to do.
so so maybe my example of the budget time is not appropriate because I actually agree with you and I agree with the chair Deneen about this one. But there could be other situations, right? When we do want to ask administration, and I just don't want the Board of Education to be a gatekeeper. And I'm only raising it because it seems like you, even though you should be going through Board of Finance, you have a working relationship with the people
No,
who.
we're the liaison from options that take from the Board of Finance into the RTM. I don't report into the Board of Finance, but
Correct.
anything that comes out of the Board of Finance, we're the liaison into the RTM. Anything that
Yeah.
comes out of the Board of Ed, you guys are the primary liaison into the RTM. It's not that you
Right.
report to them. It's not that that's the only group
Right.
that you would be working with, because
Right.
we work with a wide diversity of individuals in town. I can speak for F&B, but other people work directly with their department chairs throughout the year. Gentile shows up at Public Works.
Yeah.
Jeremy shows up at PZ&H meetings. And so there's a relationship that's built up between the departments and the committees of which they work on. But again,
Yeah.
the town is different. The way I was trying to explain this to somebody. The town is different from the Board of Ed. And the way I described it was, you got to think of the Board of Ed as being either Texas or California. It's their own country. All right. The rest of the town with Public Works, PZ&H, some of the finance things that go on in the town, Park and Rec. Well, we're all little states. And so we need a boundary set, which is why there's a little bit more definition in there. In
Yeah.
Public Works, it says you're responsible for all town facilities. Well, schools are town facilities. So we need, no place else in our ordinances does it say that Public Works is responsible for all town facilities except schools or parks.
Yeah.
So you need those type of definitions to give better clarity for what that responsibility of that committee, standing committee is.
Yeah.
Education,
Okay.
we handle the whole gamut of education, from
Yeah.
maintenance to travel to students to special ed to revenue. And
And I
Clara,
don't think,
please
and this is
help
not
me.
an issue. I mean, last point on this, right? And we don't have any current issues. The great volunteers, great people, they devote a lot of time to it, and they've been very open, the Board of Education, for us to always bringing the administration along, and so we have the direct contact. But this document should work even past the current group of people working there, right? So that's why I was raising it. But I understand that you would like us to go through the Board of Education with any questions
If
we
you
have towards
have,
the
if yeah,
administration.
the
Okay,
F&B does the same
fair
thing.
enough. Yeah, fair enough. And as a workflow, it probably makes sense.
Can I just ask one quick thing?
Sure.
You talk about the responsibilities of finance and budget. You don't specifically mention contracts. Is that something that is taken care of by what responsibilities F&B has and education has? The teacher contract, the administrator's contract, they're not mentioned here specifically, I don't think. Is that the way it's supposed to be?
That's would be in the other things, other areas assigned, because that's really the contracts drive the budget.
Right, right.
So I mean, it's one of the things that I was speaking about with Frank. On P and Z, we specifically put in that they look at P and Z fees. That's because state law says P and Z fees have to be in the ordinances. So when we just did it recently, when Jeremy came back and said, here are the fees, and the RTM had to approve it, it's because state law says it has to. Now, on the town side, we extracted all of the fees that were sitting in the ordinance, partly because some of the fees were 10 years old, but we were charging a different fee, which would create a real big problem for the town. So what they did is put it on Appendix D. And somebody said, well, we're not approving the fees. Well, yes, we are. When we prove the town side of the budget, since the revenues are driven by the fees that the Board of Selectmen or Park and Rec Commission has decided, we are effectively approving the fees because we're approving the revenue for that budget.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
As opposed to approving every individual fee.
Okay.
So, but that's the comment that you made, Peter, to add the other areas assigned, sort of gives you the umbrella for contracts.
Okay.
Right.
Good. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a good catch.
And I appreciate you guys really doing this. And, I read through it and I don't have I have one more question on the document. We may
Can
continue
I go
going
through
through
the
it if
thing,
everybody
and
else wants.
if it's not in this spot, can I quickly go through the rest of it?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Because I pardon me for saying it, but I am an ardent baseball fan, and there's 2 baseball games going on right now, and I have a dead season from now until spring training happens. So after the World Series. So all right. So town government and structure handles that. Some other things that we did. All right. You're going to notice that we're going to bring some business forward. And this actually was brought to me by Kate, and because we were talking about it. The RTM takes off for, forgetting the summer months. We take off for November and December, and everybody says we can't do business. The fact of the matter is we can, and we've been doing it more and more. And part of the thing was after election, everybody said, well, the committees don't exist. And Kate and we got a legal opinion. The committees still exist until the member's successor is named. So I'm assuming all of you are running again, or don't have to run this year. I know Ed doesn't, because Ed and I run the same year. The fact is that the Education Committee, for anyone who's still on the RTM, is still in effect until that rules organization meeting goes, where everybody puts those little pins on to say, here's the new committee. So we're still in effect, we're still operational until that side. We may have a different quorum number because some people may not have re-upped and new people haven't been assigned. But the RTM is still operational until such time that the new people are there. And that's very important. And it's very important for Kate. Was very happy that that's in, because we're bringing ahead a public works union contract where she definitely wanted the RTM to do it. And we will be doing business in November. We will be doing business in December if we need to. And that's appreciated by members of the town. And we've done it for the Board of Ed as well. So, in fact, we did 2 things for the Board of Ed in November. and I got an email from Kate saying, I hope that when the town needs it, you're going to give us the same thing. And we subsequently have. So that's a very important area. And the other thing that we put in, because everybody was asking how people assign committees and other things like that, was the representatives to the Rules Committee from each district and the Rules Committee as a whole will determine the criteria for assigning RTM members to a standing committee. This document is not saying you're using seniority or you using this. The representatives of the rules for each district do their assignment. And quite honestly, I know, Janet, you got burnt on that one year, and I apologize for that. I really do. But this is something that's going to be established. And by the way, I'm happy you're back on education. So, but yeah, I mean, I know what's happened. I've known that people have been taken off when they shouldn't have. So, but we're not getting into what the criteria is because criteria can change from year to year. And Frank and I and the people who have participated aren't going to dictate that to other people.
Frank,
We Go ahead,
Janet,
Janet. I'm sorry.
is it going to be noted that there can be a long lapse when the new people come in? You know, at this point, after Election Day, there'll be caucuses and new people will come in. And then you have to wait a very long time until the Rules Committee meets before that person can go to a meeting. And that can be as long as March or April. So is anything going to be done about that?
So I can only speak for my own committee and our own, Ed and I can speak for the district because we're in the same district. If we bring somebody in, all right, and Adele's the other rules member with me in District 3. If we're bringing somebody in, Adele and I probably know what committees they're going on, all right? So we've caucused somebody in. We tell them and notify the chair of that committee that this is going to be your new member so that they can start attending those meetings.
Yes,
they
that's
can't vote, but they
a good
should
idea.
be
Yes.
there. And we've had some people caucused in December, and we used to have an F&B meeting in December, and I find out who was caucused in and tell them, here's, show up. And we'd introduce them and, get to know. So each committee can operate differently, but in our district, if you're caucused in, here's your committee, here's the chair, we're giving you the
Well,
chair
it's
email
the
and say,
whole
show
rules,
up.
not just how your district works. There is no business, so the person can wait for months before they go to an RTM meeting because the
Well,
rule hasn't met yet. That's
well,
very common.
unless you're on Frank's committee, TGS&A, early January, you have the Board of Ed budget. End of January, you have the town budget. So if you're caucused in a December timeframe, for at least the next 4 months, you have something to do
Okay,
because
you're
there's the
just
budget.
citing one example.
I know that some committees do not meet
Yes, it's a
often.
problem. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And at one point, we managed to get the Rules Committee to have a quick meeting before an RTM meeting, just to let somebody in.
That's not a bad idea. I'm not going to write that in,
No,
but we can
well, it's an issue.
we can do that. We can do that. I'll raise it to Seth. I think that's not a bad idea. If you know somebody's caucused in and you know that there's a caucus going on, we can hold a special meeting because the district representatives know exactly where it is, and we can easily vote either before or after the meeting to assign them to the committee.
There's also more than one or two people. I mean, all the empty seats that need to be filled after November 7th are all going to be in that position.
Yeah, Janet, I think that's an effective way to do it, and I'll bring it to rules. I just don't want to force the rules to do that here.
An incentive for the committee and for the districts to get together quickly and start working on trying to find people so that they can get in early.
Yeah, well, it used to be, and that, and this may have been before, that it was very hard to bring somebody on to either education or F&B in the April timeframe because we've already done most of our work and you're coming in at the tail end of a budget. And,
Well,
I've seen it
that's the
work
way
both
it
ways.
goes. You learn something by being there. I mean, that's just the way it
As I said, I've seen it work positive and negative. So it's up to who joins. But yes, I think we can talk about how to expedite if we know caucuses are going on.
good. I think,
Um,
I find it humorous that caucus has become a verb that started in high school of the RTM. Anyhow,
well, I will tell you, I kept on asking Donna, could she send out my agenda? And I typically got the answer, yes, I can, until she finally said, Jack, will you just put down, would you please send out the agenda instead of could you? And so I've done that. So yes, I'm not going to say that I passed grammar. All right, to go to the last two parts of this, um, just to go overall, um, Peter mentioned one of the things that we did by empowering districts to be able to do it. Each standing committee, providing it's within the guidelines of rules, can set up their own ways of how they operate. In mine, I sometimes don't want to be a cog, so people do speak to Kate and Jen on certain projects that they're on without going through me. But I have a very small committee. Something else we set up with the budget buddy system. It turned out that in the original document that we currently have now, F&B was supposed to assign one or two people to each of the standing committees as a financial liaison. Now, we effectively weren't doing that, and we reestablished it when we set up the buddy system, and we do that now to just have conversations going on with all the other standing committees on the budget, and we're continuing that. The only thing it is that they are a liaison just to make sure that we're all at the same place. We added something in here only because there is executive sessions potentially on Great Island, and we didn't want to have any confusion by saying that the moderator may attend any executive session of any standing committee or special committee. That's their right. So we didn't want somebody saying, well, you're not on this committee, you can't do it. No, you're there. The we also said that one of the things that I mentioned that if the current thing says that the moderator is the one who assigns committees to resolutions or that, and we said no, it's really the rules committee, but in the absence of rules committee, an emergency, the moderator has that right. Um, any committee, and then you read the last part on 10, any committee on its own motion consider and report to the full. The last part is a FOIA issue, and I'm not getting into a discussion on draft or not draft or final. But it's really that when an agenda, this is more for the chairs, but when you set up your agenda, you send it to the moderator and you're sending it to the town clerk. Not that we report, but the town clerk controls the website to put the agenda up there, as well as the distribution to other people. Now, I don't know about your committee, but if we have something educational on what the town clerk sends out, I have to add Dr. Adley and the chair of the Board of Ed because they're not in the normal distribution of the standing committees. So that's just for information. And then when minutes are done, minutes should be sent to the moderator and also be sent to the town clerk because the town clerk is responsible of keeping a record of it and posting them on the website. And yes, we know that they took down all the old minutes and agendas from the RTM, and they're supposed to be put back up at some time, and it's being done department by department, or commission by commission. But yes, we're asking that they be put up again because that was always very helpful to have that. So that's it. That's basically it.
Okay.
Again,
Well,
it's a consensus document.
Thank you
'Cause-
so much for all your work, Jack and Frank. It's a lot of work and we appreciate it.
Wonderful, thank you. And Janet, cleaning it up for us.
Thanks, Bill, and
Yes,
the
definitely.
committee inviting us this evening. But I'd also like to thank Jack for keeping it brief. You don't realize how brief this was this evening. It's wonderful.
Yeah, we've had some really long meetings on this.
Bet.
Where's Ed?
And this was actually the shortest meeting we've had, even with some excellent questions and discussion points. But I guess after you do this about 7, 8 times, you can sort of cut things out as we go along without losing
I
sense
should
of what's
mention,
there.
as we exit, over the last couple of weeks, we've kept town council advised of what's coming in the various working drafts that we've had. And he knows that he'll get a final shortly, and that we're looking forward to him to present a resolution to rules, so that rules can then decide at the next meeting as to whether to put it on the agenda for November or not. Clearly, we hope that it will go on, but if there's something structurally wrong, then we'll take our time and get it straightened out. So we don't want anybody
So
saying we're
I'm going to
rushing.
cut off Frank here. Right now, Frank likes to put in a lot of caveats. This we would not be presenting this, all right, to rules if Frank and I thought there was anything wrong and that doesn't represent the consensus of what we had. And you saw, Peter, from what your suggestion on education, how quickly that went into the document. That's how this has been running when people from various committees have made suggestions. We're not bringing it to rules if we don't think it's a good, solid document for us to operate on for years. Is it going to meet everybody's needs? No, but it gives us enough structure and boundaries, but still it gives us some encouragement and empowerment to go and do our job as one of the 3 stools. So while I appreciate Frank's, caveats here, the intention of the Rules Committee is to bring it in November and vote on it. And we're hopeful for an up and down vote, you know. So this isn't like the old days, Clara, when we did Board of Ed budgets, and at 1:00 in the morning, we were still at what is now the senior center going through budget items.
That's true.
This is, I
But
remember
don't
those
you miss
days.
it? I mean, sometimes I miss that. So anyway, but I think this is much more efficient. So thanks to everybody.
So thank you for spending some time with us.
Yes.
And Ed, thank you for, I thought starting with those 2 questions were really good. Thanks a lot.
Okay, take care,
Um,
everybody. Good night.